Alright, welcome everybody to Life Made Simple. Today, we're going to be replacing this air intake hose on a 2007 Honda Pilot. It turns out it's really just completely severed, disconnected from the clamp that's holding on the other part of the rubber to the throttle body. So, no way to repair this. It's really a pull and replace. So basically, I'm just going to take these wires out of these clips. I'm going to remove a few clamps to remove these pieces off of there. There's this spring here. Basically, you need to remove to pull this out. And then also the hose over here with some pliers. So let's get started. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to remove the plastic engine cover. It just has these three plastic grommets. Just stick a flathead into it, turn them all so they face vertical, and that'll release the front of the plastic cover. And the back is just held on by two rubber plugs. You basically just pull up and it comes right up. You don't have to do that, but I like to do it because it exposes the hoses, the hose clamps, the wiring, and it's just a little bit more room to work. So now I just remove the wiring harness or clip that goes into the map, and then loosen the hose clamp for where the intake hose connects to the throttle body. And as you can see, I've got a buddy helping me out today, which always makes it more fun. Here I'm loosening up the second hose clamp. And then you just work that attachment out. I think that's a resonator. If anybody knows for sure, let me know by leaving a note in the comments. And if nobody knows, it's all good. I'm going to call Honda and ask them what that piece is anyway. Remove and retain that hose clamp after removing that attachment. And then here I'm using some hose clamp pliers. And that'll lock that hose clamp in place while we go to work on removing those tubes later. So here I'm using a pick and a flathead screwdriver to remove this spring clamp, which basically holds the air intake hose tightly to the air filter box. So I just use the flathead to hold it out while I keep using the pick to pry it away. And I'm going to leave it attached to the air filter box while we replace the hose. I'm not going to take it off and try to put it on the other one, and you'll see why later. And so now I'm just starting to separate the air intake hose from the air filter box. And so that's just basically wiggling it back and forth as you remove it from the air filter box. So I noticed that after doing this initially, it gets it off of the air filter box, but there's not quite enough room to completely detach it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to undo the 4 bolts that are holding the air filter box in place here. And as I do that, it frees up that air filter box. I can pull it up and out of the way to give more room for me to remove that hose. So here I basically can now finally detach the air intake hose, and I just pull up to get that air filter box out of the way. Now that the air intake hose is freed up and that hose clamp is being released by those pliers, it's just a matter of wiggling it off of that bleeder tube. And this is where it's helpful to have an extra set of hands. It's just a matter of time. You basically keep pulling and turning until it finally comes off. Remember to remove and retain that hose clamp for the hose to be secured onto the throttle body. As you can see, there's that old piece of rubber there. Just pry away at it till it basically comes off. It's a good time to check the air filter as well. So take a look at the air filter, and what we do is we shine a flashlight through it. If you can still see light, you're good to go. If you cannot see any light going through, it's probably time to change that out. So I think it's in good shape, so I'm just going to put it back in place and I'm going to reuse it. So the last thing to remove off the air intake hose is that plastic attachment on the bottom. I already loosened that hose clamp. So you just pull out the plastic, retain that hose clamp for attachment to the new air intake hose. which is this piece here. So I decided to order a genuine Honda part for this one rather than the Doorman that I've used before off of Amazon. And I'm just doing a comparison here, just making sure that they look the same, have all the holes in the right places, the clips for the wiring harness are in the right places, and so forth, just before I begin to install it. But as these are both genuine Honda parts, there's a high expectation that it's going to go great, and it looks like they are a perfect match. So now it's time to begin the installation of the new air intake hose. So begin with the hose clamp on the bottom, put that on first, get the plastic attachment, snug it in there, take your 10mm socket, and you're going to tighten up that hose clamp after you've got that plastic piece fitted in there. And now let's get the other hose clamp on, the one that connects the air intake hose to the throttle body. Just put that on there, shouldn't fall off. If it does, you're going to go fishing for it. After that, we're putting on the hose clamp for the vacuum line. We'll put those hose clamp pliers on it. Now it's important just to get it a little bit further down below the lip. And now we're going to get it lined up and reattached to that bleeder tube, which I believe is part of the PCV system. So here I just add a little bit of spray, just work it in. I just want it on the very end of it, just to help it ease on. And I just give it a little bit of effort, make sure the hose clamp is released, and it just pops right on. And now I'm just lining up the air intake hose with the throttle body, and I'm going to get it on there before tightening stuff up. So here it's on there, double check that bleeder tube, pop that in there. And initially we're going to release those hose clamp pliers. It's not fully on the rubber of the air intake, so I was working it a bit and then I grabbed a small screwdriver just to help push it further on. So even though it was loosened, I couldn't quite get it into the proper spot. So I used the screwdriver just to push it back a little bit further so that it's not sitting partially on the air intake hose and partially not on it.
Run the cable properly.
Always double check your work.
Oh, that's not all the way, is it? Oh, I got you. There we go. Hose on. Clip back up.
Now it's time to reattach the air intake hose to the air filter box. So I line that up, I get the box in place, and make sure that tab is up top. And there's a little groove that it's supposed to fit into, so once you've got it lined up and you snug it on there, that top tab should fit right in between those two tabs on the air filter box. So this is where I was saying leave that spring clamp on the air filter box, because here it's easier to basically redo what you did before, which is use the flathead, use your pick, and slowly work that spring clamp back on to that air filter hose and into that groove it's supposed to sit in. And now it's time to tighten up the 4 bolts for the air filter box, and I believe they are all 8mm. So I just used 8mm with an extension and my cordless ratchet. Put the hose clamp back just before you plug in that final plastic attachment, which again I think is a resonator. Just twist that in there, and after that snug up that hose clamp with a 10mm socket. And that's about it. So when you're done this, basically double check your work, check the resonators, make sure they're tight, check the wires, make sure they're clipped in okay, the hose clamps are tight, the map is plugged back in, and the bleeder tube is plugged in. Put the plastic engine cover back on, start it up, take it for a drive, and make sure everything's working properly. If this was helpful, let me know by hitting that like button. If you have a question, comment, or feedback, feel free to leave me a note. And then lastly, subscribe, of course, to be notified of all of our latest DIY and tool review videos.